I'm standing in my lawyer's office, watching the settlement papers slide across the mahogany desk toward me. My name is printed there in black ink. The amount, $3 million. I don't smile. I don't celebrate. I just stare at the signature line where I'm supposed to write my name. Ms. Chen, this is legitimate, my lawyer, Richard, says for the third time. His voice carries that mix of congratulation and caution. He thinks I'm being cautious because the amount is overwhelming. He's wrong. I'm being careful because I already know exactly what I'm about to do with this money, and it's not what anyone would expect. I sign. The pen feels light in my hand, almost weightless. But the moment the ink touches paper, everything changes. I become someone else, a ghost in my own life. 3 weeks earlier, I had signed the actual sale documents. My software company, CloudSync, something I'd built in my apartment 5 years ago on late nights and borrowed confidence, had been purchased by a Silicon Valley firm for $3 million. It was real. It was legitimate. It was mine. I'd called my family immediately. My mother picked up first, as she always does. "Sarah, hello, everything okay?" Her voice had that particular note of concern she reserves for when I've been working too hard. "Mom, I need to tell you something, it's big." I could hear her putting down whatever she was doing. I could practically see her sitting down at the kitchen table, the one where my father used to read the newspaper every Sunday morning before he left us when I was 12. "I sold the company," I said quietly, "for $3 million. The silence that followed lasted 3 seconds, maybe 4. Then she screamed. Not in excitement, in something else, something that made my stomach tighten. Within an hour, my entire family knew. My brother Marcus called from his accounting office downtown. My sister-in-law Jennifer sent a text with a string of emojis. My mother called back 3 times, each call shorter than the last, her voice shifting from joy to something measured and strange. But it was the dinner at my mother's house that changed everything. I remember standing in her kitchen, the one that smells like jasmine tea and old memories, watching her make dumplings. My mother had always used cooking as a language. Dumplings meant celebration. Dumplings meant love. "Sarah, we should talk about your money," she said, not looking up from the filling she was spooning into the thin pastry. I was helping, folding each one carefully the way she'd taught me as a child. My hands moved on instinct, memory in motion. "Okay," I said. "What about it?" "Your brother has been having some trouble. Business problems. He needs help." There it was, not even dressed up very well. Just stated plainly, the way you'd ask someone to pass the salt. "How much trouble?" I asked. 200,000, maybe 250. I kept folding. Fold, seal, place on the tray. Fold, seal, place. My hands didn't shake, my voice didn't waver. "I'll think about it," I said. But I already knew I wouldn't. That night, I started writing things down. Marcus came over the next evening. He'd always been the charming one, the successful one, the brother who seemed to slide through life without friction. He worked in finance, high salary, important friends. He'd always looked at my software company with a kind of amused tolerance, the way someone might smile at a child's drawings before putting them in a drawer. "Sarah, hey," he said, settling onto my couch like he belonged there. "Mom told me about the sale. That's incredible." "Thanks," I said. I was making tea, keeping my hands busy. "Look, I wanted to talk to you about something, person to person." I waited. I poured the hot water into 2 cups. The steam rose between us like a wall. "I made some bad decisions," Marcus continued. His voice was soft now, vulnerable in a way I'd never heard from him before. "Investment stuff. Jennifer doesn't even know how bad it is. I'm about to lose the house." I sat across from him with my cup. I let him see my face, concerned, hesitant, the face of a sister who's being asked to carry someone else's weight. "How bad?" I asked. 250,000 bad. That's what it would take to fix it, to settle everything and restart clean. I nodded slowly. "That's a lot of money." I know it's a lot to ask, and I hate asking you, but you just made $3 million. I'm not asking for a gift forever. I can pay you back over time. Interest, everything. I'll do whatever you want. He looked at me with eyes that were almost desperate, and I realized something in that moment. He believed his own story. He actually believed that if he told it right, with the right expression and the right amount of shame, I would hand him $250,000 from money I'd earned by myself, money I'd built something real to create. I need to think about it, I told him. Of course, but don't take too long, okay? Things are moving fast, the lawyers are getting involved. I need to settle some stuff in the next few weeks. He hugged me when he left. I felt how tense his body was, even while he was pretending to be relaxed. He was already spending the money in his head. I could feel it. The real problem started 3 days later when my mother called me into her bedroom. She was sitting on her bed, the same bed she and my father had shared before he decided his secretary was more interesting than his wife. "Sit," she said. I sat. "Your brother told me you said you'd think about it. That's not good enough, Sarah." "Mom, listen to me. Your brother is my son. You have money now, real money. What are you going to do with it that's more important than keeping your brother's family stable? What are you going to do, become rich and forget where you came from?" I felt something cold move through my chest. "I'm not saying no," I said carefully. "I'm saying I need to think about it." Thinking is code for no. I know you, Sarah, and you're being selfish. The word hung in the air between us like a slap. Selfish, because I'd built a company, because I'd worked 18-hour days, because I'd paid for my own education while my mother stayed home and my father disappeared, and Marcus had gone to a private school that somehow I was expected to help pay for retroactively. "I'll call you," I said. I stood up. She didn't try to stop me. But the manipulation didn't stop there. It accelerated. Jennifer started texting me about the house. Photos of the kitchen they wanted to renovate. A description of the school district where they wanted to keep their kids. Each message was calculated, not quite a direct ask, but definitely pointing in a direction. My mother called me 3 times a day, each call containing a story about something Marcus had said, something someone had asked him, the pressure he was under. The subtext was always the same: fix this or watch him suffer. And then came the public humiliation. I found out about it from a friend who saw it on Facebook. My mother had posted a photo from years ago, me at my college graduation, looking young and naive, with a caption that made my blood stop moving. "So proud of my brilliant daughter who just made millions. I always knew she'd be successful. I sacrificed everything for my children's education so they could reach their potential. Now I hope Sarah remembers that family comes first. Proud mom, family first, gratefulness." The post had 300 likes. Comments filled up underneath. People saying how inspiring it was. People asking about my software company. People making jokes about how I'd gotten lucky. None of them knew the real message. Give your brother money or you're a bad daughter. I deleted my social media accounts that night. Not because I was upset, though I was, but because I was starting to plan, and I needed to be invisible while I did it. The first thing I did was hire Richard, the lawyer, though I didn't tell anyone in my family. I walked into his office and told him exactly what was happening. The manipulation, the pressure, the posts, all of it. "This is extortion," he said plainly. "Emotional extortion, which is harder to prove legally, but it's real." "I know," I said. "I want to document everything." "Start keeping records of conversations. Text messages, emails, voicemail. Document your mother's social media posts. If your brother makes direct financial requests in writing, that's gold." I started carrying my phone everywhere. Started taking screenshots. Started writing down conversations and times and exact words. Meanwhile, I did something else. I talked to a financial advisor. Not about how to spend the money or invest it for the future. About how to protect it. How to make it invisible without hiding it illegally. How to build walls. I opened a new bank account that no one knew about. I moved the money there slowly, in increments that wouldn't raise questions. I set up automatic payments to bills from a different account, one I controlled that my family might see. The main account became a ghost, mine, but invisible. Then I did the hardest thing. I let them think I was broke. I called my mother on a Tuesday evening. I'd planned the call carefully. I knew what I was going to say, and I knew how I was going to say it. Defeated, tired, apologetic. "Mom, I need to tell you something about the money," I said. What happened?" "There were taxes, capital gains taxes, and the company had some debts I didn't know about, old contracts that had to be settled. By the time everything was done after lawyers and accountants," I let my voice break a little. It was easy to do. I imagined giving the money away. I imagined having to work for someone else again. "There's barely anything left, maybe 50,000 after I pay off my apartment." The silence on the line was different this time. Smaller, like the air had gone out of something. "Oh," my mother said. "Oh, Sarah. I'm sorry. I know I can't help Marcus. I'm sorry." I heard her breathing. I wondered what she was calculating. Was it worth continuing the pressure campaign on a daughter who had nothing? Or was she already moving on, already thinking about who else she could ask? "It's okay," she said finally. "These things happen. You did your best." We talked for a few more minutes, perfunctory, hollow, and then we said goodbye. I sat on my couch afterward and didn't feel guilty, not even a little. But pretending to be poor was a science I had to get right. I stopped wearing the clothes I'd been buying. I started shopping at thrift stores, deliberately picking things that looked worn and unfashionable. I stopped getting my hair done. I let my nails go. I drove an old car I bought for $4,000 instead of the new one I'd been considering. I watched my family's faces change when they looked at me. My mother stopped trying to get me to help with Marcus. But something else happened instead, something that had always been underneath, now suddenly visible because I wasn't throwing money at it to hide it. She started criticizing me. "You look tired. Are you sleeping? You look so exhausted. Your apartment is too small. Don't you feel cramped there? You work so hard. Isn't it depressing, working at that coding firm? Shouldn't you be doing something more important?" Every comment was a message. You are not enough. You never were. You only mattered when you had money. The realization was cold and clarifying. Meanwhile, I was collecting evidence like a woman building a case in a court of law, because that's exactly what I was doing. I kept every text message from my mother, every email. I had Richard hire a private investigator to document Marcus's financial situation. What I found was interesting. He wasn't actually in danger of losing his house. His mortgage was current. His job was stable. The $250,000 he needed wasn't for a crisis. It was for a vacation home he wanted to buy in Colorado. I found emails between him and a real estate agent. I found bank statements showing he had $70,000 in savings. I found evidence that he'd lied directly to my face. I also found something worse. A text conversation between Marcus and his best friend, sent 2 days after I'd told them about the sale. "Got her," Marcus had written. "She's going to help us. Mom's going to soften her up first, then I'll ask for $250K. Told her it was for the house, but really we're using it for the Colorado property and a new car. Sarah's always been soft. This is going to be easy." His friend's response, "Your sister sounds like a mark." I read those messages 17 times. Each time something in me became a little more still, a little colder, a little more certain. 6 months into my invisible life, I stopped being sad and started being clear. I didn't cry anymore. I didn't lie awake at night feeling hurt. I went to work at my coding job, a position I'd taken specifically to maintain the cover story, and I did my work well. I came home and I reviewed my documents. I met with Richard once a week. I planned. The transformation was quiet. No one noticed. My mother called less frequently. Marcus didn't call at all. He'd moved on to other people, other potential sources of money. Jennifer stopped texting. My family had written me off as someone who couldn't help them, which meant I was no longer useful, which meant I was no longer part of their inner circle. It was exactly what I needed. But I wasn't finished. Not yet. I was still missing one crucial piece of evidence, and I knew where to find it. My mother had always kept a diary. Not a current one, but old ones. She had boxes of them in her closet, dating back decades. I knew about them because once, when I was 15, I'd found one and read an entry about how she felt trapped in her marriage, how she resented my father for his failures, how she sometimes imagined leaving. I'd put it back immediately, feeling like I'd seen something I shouldn't have, but I'd never forgotten that those diaries existed. So one afternoon, when I knew my mother had gone to her book club, I let myself into her house with the spare key she'd given me years ago and had never asked for back. I went straight to her bedroom closet, moved aside the winter coats, and found the boxes. I photographed every page of the diaries from the last 5 years, every entry where she talked about my father's absence and how I was supposed to be the one who stayed, who took care of her, who owed her something for the sacrifice of raising me. Every entry where she mentioned managing Marcus, coaching him on what to say to me, planning the approach they'd use to convince me to give them money. One entry, dated 3 days before Marcus's first ask, was particularly clear. I told Sarah that Marcus needed help. She was hesitant. That's good. It means she's thinking about it. Marcus will be more direct. He's better at this than I am. I've spent so much on his education, his opportunities. Now he can return the favor by getting Sarah to help us. She owes us everything. I read my mother's own words and felt nothing. That was the moment I knew I'd succeeded in becoming someone new, someone who couldn't be hurt by this anymore. I also did something else, something that required patience and strategy. I called Marcus. It was the first time we'd spoken in months. "Hey," he said, sounding surprised. "How are you doing?" "I'm struggling," I said, and I let my voice shake a little, not faking anymore, but drawing on genuine exhaustion. "The financial situation is even worse than I said. I might lose my apartment." I could almost hear him, recalculating in real time. "Oh, that sucks," he said. "Are you going to be okay?" "I don't know. I've been thinking about the money you asked me about before. The 250,000. "Yeah," his voice changed. It became more alert, more hungry. "I was wondering, would you be willing to lend me 50,000? Just short term. I'd pay you back once I get back on my feet. I know it's ironic, but I'm desperate." There was a pause, a long one. "Sarah, I can't do that," he said finally. "I'm in a tough spot myself." "Right, of course, I just thought. I mean, you asked me for help." That was different. I was in crisis. And I'm not. "You'll figure it out. You always do." I felt something crystalline form in my chest. This was the evidence I'd been waiting for. Not documented evidence that would hold up in court, but evidence of character. Of the truth underneath all the manipulation. My brother wouldn't help me, but he had expected me to help him. That was the contract my family had written without my permission, and I was the only one holding it. "Okay," I said quietly. "I understand." "Sarah, I have to go. Thanks for listening." I hung up before he could say anything else. 7 months after I'd signed the sale papers, I walked into Richard's office and told him it was time. "Are you sure?" he asked. He always asked this. I think he wanted to make sure I wasn't doing something I'd regret out of anger. But I wasn't angry anymore. Anger was a hot thing, and I'd cooled down long ago. What I felt now was certainty. "I'm sure," I said. "I want to file a civil lawsuit against my family for emotional extortion. I want my mother removed from my apartment lease and from any access to my financial information. I want documentation of everything, and I want it all to be public." Richard nodded slowly. "This is going to hurt. They're going to fight back." "Let them," I said. "I have evidence." The lawsuit was filed on a Wednesday morning. By Thursday, it was everywhere. Not in the news, it wasn't a big enough case for that, but in the circles that mattered. Our community, my mother's friends, Marcus's colleagues, the people we'd seen at family dinners and holiday parties. The lawsuit detailed everything. The emotional manipulation, the posts on social media, the pressure, the lies about Marcus's financial situation, the investment property he'd been trying to buy while claiming poverty. The messages between him and his friend calling me a mark. I included it all. My mother called my cell phone 17 times in the first hour. I didn't answer. Richard had advised me not to. Instead, I received a text from her. "How could you do this to your family? How could you be so cruel?" Marcus didn't contact me. He didn't have to. I heard through friends that he was furious, that he was telling people I'd fabricated evidence, that I was unstable, that I was doing this out of spite because he'd rejected my offer of help. The narrative shifted. Suddenly, I wasn't the victim, I was the villain, the ungrateful daughter, the bitter sister, the cold, calculating woman who'd pretended to be poor to trap her family into revealing their true nature. And you know what? That was almost right. 3 weeks before the court date, my mother did something I wasn't expecting. She called Richard's office directly. He told me about it in a meeting, his expression carefully neutral. "She wants to settle," he said. "For how much?" "She's offering $50,000 to you in exchange for dropping the suit and signing an NDA, preventing you from discussing any of this publicly." I thought about it for exactly 2 seconds. "Tell her no," I said. "Sarah, this is a significant offer. You could walk away right now with $50,000 and no battle." "I know," I said, "and I'm saying no." Richard leaned back in his chair. "Can I ask why?" "Because she doesn't get to buy her way out of this. Not with my own money, not with my own broken trust. The only outcome I'll accept is a judgment from a court that documents what she and Marcus did. I want a record. I want it to be official. I want them to have to answer for it in front of a judge." "That's going to be a lot harder, a lot messier." "I know," I said again. "That's why I'm doing it." The courtroom was smaller than I expected. I'd imagined something grander, but real legal battles don't happen in marble halls with dramatic lighting. They happen in beige rooms with fluorescent panels and tired furniture and judges who have heard 1,000 stories just like yours. I sat in the front row. My mother sat 2 rows behind me, Marcus beside her. Jennifer was there too, looking uncomfortable in a way that suggested she hadn't wanted to come. My lawyer was excellent, calm and methodical. He presented the documents, the screenshots of texts, the diary entries, the evidence that the financial crisis was fictional, the messages between Marcus and his friend. My mother's lawyer, an older woman with silver hair who looked like she'd done 1,000 of these cases, argued that emotional pressure within families wasn't the same as extortion, that my mother had every right to hope her daughter would help her son, that I was misinterpreting normal family dynamics as something sinister. And then I testified. I hadn't planned to speak. I thought my evidence would speak for me, but Richard had convinced me otherwise. "You need to make them see you," he'd said. "Not as a victim, but as a person. Smart, capable, someone who wasn't fooled by manipulation, someone who saw it clearly and documented it methodically. That's your power in this room." So I sat in the witness box and told my story. I talked about how I'd felt when my mother asked me for money. I talked about the shame she'd created with her social media post, the way she'd positioned my success as a failure of gratitude. I talked about Marcus's conversation with his friend, about the moment I realized they weren't just asking for help, they were hunting. I was hurt, I told the judge, my voice steady and clear. I was hurt because these were people I loved, but what hurt more was realizing that their love was conditional, that I only mattered to them when I could be useful, so I tested them. I wanted to see who they actually were when money wasn't involved. And what I found is that they were people who saw me as a resource to exploit, not as a daughter or a sister. That's not family. That's predation. My mother's face went gray. The judge took 2 weeks to issue his ruling. When it came, Richard called me to his office. He handed me the document and watched my face as I read. The judge found in my favor. He ruled that my family's actions constituted emotional and financial extortion. He ordered my mother to pay me $30,000 in damages. He issued a restraining order preventing both my mother and Marcus from contacting me without legal representation present. He also made a note in his ruling that was almost casual in how devastating it was. The defendant's own diary entries provide clear documentation of intent to manipulate and exploit the plaintiff for financial gain. This was not innocent family disagreement. This was calculated exploitation of familial bonds for personal enrichment. It was over, not just legally, but in every way that mattered. I didn't feel victorious, not in the way I thought I would. When I walked out of the courthouse, there was no surge of triumph, no sense of cosmic justice delivered. What I felt was something quieter and sadder. I felt the weight of the people I would no longer see, the family I no longer had. My mother never paid the $30,000. She appealed, and Richard said we could push it further, but I told him to let it go. The money wasn't the point anymore. The money had never been the point. The point was truth. The point was refusing to be manipulated. The point was refusing to let someone else write the story of my own life. I did something else after the court case ended. I used my real money, the $3 million that had been hidden the entire time, to start a foundation for women who'd been financially exploited by family members. I funded scholarships for girls from low-income backgrounds trying to start businesses. I became an angel investor for female entrepreneurs. I took the $3 million and turned it into something that would outlast me, something that would help people who were in the position I'd been in. My mother saw a news article about the foundation. She tried to reach out to me through a mutual friend, saying that she'd made mistakes, that she wanted to reconcile. I had Richard send her a message telling her I wasn't interested in reconciliation, that I had moved on, that she was no longer part of my life. The last time I saw my brother was at a grocery store, 6 months after the trial. He was standing in the produce section, looking older than he should have. His marriage to Jennifer had ended during the trial. She'd decided she didn't want to be part of a family so willing to manipulate and exploit. He'd tried to salvage things with our mother, but she'd been so focused on me, on her anger at me, that she'd neglected him. He'd ended up alone. We didn't speak. We didn't make eye contact. But I saw him, and he saw me, and I think we both understood something in that moment. He'd been just like our mother. He'd looked at me and seen a resource. He'd looked at our relationship and seen an opportunity. And when I'd stopped being useful, he'd simply walked away. The worst part was that he probably didn't understand what he'd done wrong. In his mind, he'd been reasonable. His needs had been legitimate. My refusal to help was a character flaw. I left the store without buying anything. Now, a year later, I sit in my apartment. A nice one, in a good neighborhood, completely paid for and completely mine, and I think about what I've learned. I've learned that family is a word people use to explain why they should be allowed to hurt you. I've learned that love, when it's conditional on usefulness, isn't love at all. I've learned that the people closest to you are sometimes the ones most willing to exploit you if you give them the chance. But I've also learned that you don't have to let them. You can be quiet. You can be strategic. You can document the truth and wait for the right moment to reveal it. You can test people and see who they really are. You can refuse to be manipulated, even if the manipulation comes wrapped in the language of family and obligation. I spent 6 months pretending to be poor. I spent 6 months playing a role while I gathered evidence and built my case. I spent 6 months becoming someone my family didn't recognize, someone they underestimated, someone they thought they could pressure into submission. And when I finally revealed the truth, it was absolute. That's what people never expect. They expect you to fight with emotion, to scream and cry and rage against them. They don't expect you to fight with cold precision, with documented facts, with the kind of patience that only comes when you've stopped hopping they'll change and started accepting what they actually are. I won because I was willing to be someone they didn't understand, someone who didn't need their love enough to compromise her own integrity, someone who could look at her family and see them clearly without the distortion of hope or desperation. I won because I was stronger than the machinery of their manipulation. And more than that, I won because I was willing to accept the cost of winning, which was never having a family again. Some people might call that a loss. They might feel sorry for me, alone in my nice apartment, surrounded by money I'd earned myself, knowing that the people who should love me don't. But they're wrong. I'm not alone. I'm finally free. And that's worth every penny.